This video is sponsored by the Carry All Studio Bag. More about that later in the video. In this video, we take Games Workshop's most boring terrain and we turn it into something disgustingly fun. That's right, in early 2022, Games Workshop released the STC Hab Bunker set, and while covered in detail, they're glorified square boxes. There's not much going on with this kit, but we're going to corrupt it with Grandfather Nurgle's blessing and show you all some great ways to do the same with your terrain kits. It's tabletop time!
We've got our terrain all built and ready to go, so now we're going to talk about what we're going to put on it.
Yeah, so we're going to add all these Nurgle little things. I had this idea for like, the warp is sort of coalescing the side of the wall and like sloughing down, like the metal has become flesh and it's become like stomachs and like weird gestating pools of bubbling gross. Yeah, all that filth. I'm into it.
Disgusting. Okay, like the elephant's foot.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna keep it pretty simple but very nurgly and add a lot of like tendrils, maybe some pus and some boils and make it look really gnarly.
Well, one of the things I think makes this terrain look kind of boring is that it's all just right angles and squares. So I'm going to add some real like fleshy wounds and monstrous things to just break up the silhouette. And I have this guy from the Titan. He's a servitor from inside one of the Titan builds that we just had kicking around that got cut off. Yeah. And I kind of like the idea of fusing this poor servitor into the wall and Nurglifying his surrounds, so he's just gestating in this horrible environment.
Hoarding Warhammer works.
So we've got a bunch of cool ideas and we're all going to be working on different areas of this project and bring it back together to make some really interesting looking Nurgle-corrupted terrain.
Let's go.
Cool, let's start.
Whenever I think of Nurgle, I think of tentacles and boils that are filled with pus. It's disgusting, but sculpting gross stuff can actually be a lot of fun. I wanted to create small sections of Nurgle's love that we could glue onto the terrain a bit later on. This meant rolling out some long noodles and coiling them around themselves and leaving them to dry. I then went and made some small patches of what I'm just going to assume is skin and added on a couple of rolled up pieces of milliput to make boils. Once these were all cured, I glued them onto the various pieces of terrain and did a little bit of sculpting just to help them blend in a bit better. Overall, I'm super happy with how this turned out, even if it made me feel a little bit uneasy. Yuck.
For my flavour of Nurgle in this build, I wanted to create some vat-like cavities, growths sort of hanging off the walls. Kind of like pitcher plants, but infinitely more gross. The best part about this sculpt is that it should be deceptively easy. I make a blob of milliput of any size and just shove it onto the wall. Then I'll overload my tool with water and push the putty around until it looks slimy and bonded to the wall. I want it to look like the metal wall has sloughed down with chaotic corruption, as if it was molten. To add more detail, I'll make tentacles and boils similar to Jenn, but I'm also going to use spare bits from Death Guard kits to further Nurglify the walls. Skulls, horns, and demonic faces mounted or pushing out of the material world will add so much character that this kit was missing from the start. I also put skulls and bones into my Nurgle growths as if they were melting down, which is a technical effect I can add later.
So I have got the central bunker piece to work on, and it's really boring. It's basically just a square box. So I'm going to improve that. The first thing I'm going to do is give it a floor out of plasticard, and then I think I'm going to make the roof bursting open with all kinds of Nurgly tendrils and tentacles coming out. It's going to look really cool, so ain't nothing to it but to do it. Wait. That doesn't... There's no floor.
There was a flaw in your idea.
I'm loving how the expanding foam is looking. It's disgustingly Nurgly, but now I'm going to add some of my tentacles, start wrapping them around, having them ripping the ceiling up from the inside. I think it's going to look really cool, but I have to be careful not to disturb the expanding foam because it's still setting. I think you can already see with breaking up the silhouette that this is completely changing the vibe of this super boring bit of terrain and making it pretty cool. To make these, I rolled out 2 long worms of milliput and flattened them towards the tips. Then I used a toothpick to make little suckers up and down the length. These tentacles bursting through the ceiling will add some dynamic height and a little bit of textural interest to the bunker, but I need to make sure the metal looks appropriately twisted. To do this, I use a pair of snippers to roughly bend and shape the edges of the roof, snipping off excess parts where the pieces felt too flat and too deliberate. With the roof ruined, I pushed the bottom part of the tentacles down into the expanding foam with a dab of super glue. With the bases of the tentacles fixed, I could then curl them up and out, following the shape of the ruined ceiling. To ensure that they stayed put up the top as well, I also dabbed a little bit of super glue to make sure the tips of the tentacles stayed exactly where I needed them. For some focal points across the bunker, I've also used some lovely Garden of Nurgle Gribblies that Jenn had sculpted. These were used to decorate up the suffering servitor that I'd wedged into some expanding foam. And I blended them all into the walls and the foam with a toothpick. Going back and forth across the entire project, just adding some details here and there, making it feel nicely corrupted, I can look back at my conversion and say, this is a definite upgrade.
We're out of paint! I can't spray her!
Yeah, I think we're out of plastic glue as well.
Hobby run?
Hobby run.
Hobby run.
So our local hobby store doesn't have bags, but luckily we do.
Something that's been really cool about working in a studio is we've actually been present for the whole development of Jazza's new Carry-All Studio-like Kickstarter. He's produced 2 awesome bags and we've had input on that, and you can back the Kickstarter right now. There's some really high quality bags that not only look cool, but they feel great as well, and we're going to tell you a little bit about them.
So we definitely need plastic glue. We don't have any of that. Wraithbone would be a really cool color to base our terrain in. Yes!
For the Dark Gods.
Thankfully, the thoughtful compartment layout and the padded zip pocket design for laptops will keep my sister safe.
There are 2 sizes of bags, the Carry-All Studio and the Carry-All Studio Lite. And for me, the Lite is perfect for taking everything I need to a war game to the tables. Rulebooks, codexes, dice, measuring tape, and even a drink bottle holder so I can stay hydrated at the table.
So when I've got a full bag, I prefer to wear it as a backpack, so it's easier to carry. Both bags can become a messenger bag, a backpack, or even just carried by the handle, with some easy adjustments.
The Carry-All Studio Bag Kickstarter was funded in just over an hour, showing everyone's desire for a high-quality product.
You can back the project right now, choosing from the small bag, the large bag individually, both combined at a discount, or a loaded bundle with a signed print from Jazza and $100 worth of art products in each bundle. And the bundle tier will also unlock all future stretch goals, which will be added into the bundle. So don't miss out, check out the links on our description and support this studio-made product and the YouTubers who make you the content you love. You know you want to.
But we're all stocked up, so it's time to go back to the studio.
Nice bag.
We're back. We've got our spray paints. It's time to go. Oi. Patches.
Yeah, I love the splatteriness. This all just adds to the look.
Alright, we've finished spraying, we've done our colours and our little zenithal. Now it's time to have fun with effects and some washes.
Murray and Jenn have done an awesome job establishing all the base tones in this. It's time to get it ready for streaking grime. So with the extra zenithal and some varnish applied, this is looking super cool. I'm already loving the effect. Everyone's done such a great job. But to help differentiate the different areas, before I put on some gribbly streaking grime, I'm actually going to sponge on some dead flesh and some off-white, just to pull away the fleshy areas from the metal to create that distinction. So to do that, I use a sponge. This is just ripped out of some Games Workshop carry case. You can also get it from hardware stores. Any kind of high density foam for packing. Tear it up and dip it in some paint and then sponge off a lot of the excess and then just dab it along the model, and this will give you a really rough, organic and mottled look to your highlight. This is a really good technique that's suitable for terrain and larger features, but it is not extremely suitable for fine detail and small paint jobs. Sometimes it's really hard to reach your hand in and sponge Nurgle's more hard to reach pustules, but on a project like this, it's important that you try to, because with that done, I can now streak and grime it.
Get some disgusting life into the fleshy areas of the builds, I'm going to go in with the airbrush and just put in some Carroburg Crimson basically shading all of the fleshy areas from the underside, sort of a reverse zenithal. I'll put this on fairly heavily and it'll give this really nasty welted skin feel to it. Then I'm just going to put a very light touch of a green wash onto some of the lower areas of the metal. This will also help differentiate between the metal and the growth areas. This will go directly onto the red areas, bleeding onto more of the white areas. This will give a nice pop of yellow, but also turn some of the red into a nice sepia color, which is both very moody and also very Blanchitsu. It's a very cool vibe. Then as a final touch, I don't think some of the red areas are dark enough, so I'll just go in with a purple and just make them just a little darker in some of the deeper recesses. Then all that's left is to simply repeat all these steps on all of the walls and pieces that we have.
The fleshy areas of the terrain are looking awesome now that Murray's airbrushed them, but I'd like to create some distinction in the metallic areas of the model. On an almost Blanchitsu style paint job like this, I'm really cautious about introducing metallic paints at this stage. So instead I'm going to use a dark grey and sponge it onto all of the metal surfaces such as pipes and gauges. As a highlight, I will also sponge onto the uppermost surfaces a mid grey. By using sponging, we can keep this really nice organic and rough texture that carries across the whole model and helps everything blend together. However, this does leave us with a little bit of a problem. The hard to reach areas are now brighter than our sponge detail, so we need to use a wash, in this case Nuln Oil, to sink into those areas and darken them up.
The terrain is now looking really together, but we have to be careful not to introduce too many pops of colour. However, I do just want to add a little touch of rust onto the metal surfaces. To do this, I use a small piece of sponge, sponging on a dark brown, and then an orangey brown on top of that to simulate rust. On this project, we decided not to go all the way up to a bright rust orange, as an extra colour would be an unnecessary distraction when the focal point should be flesh.
So the terrain is looking awesome and it's almost finished, but it's time to add some special effects. Murray, you came up with an idea.
Yes. This is kind of what I did for the slime for my Tyranids, that really vicious green. Perfect. Gloopies.
So we're gonna mix some acrylic ink with some of this very sticky Yoo-hoo glue to make some stringy green slime. We're also gonna use some vomit technical effects and some blood technical effects, blood for the blood god, and kind of just moisten this disgusting terrain up.
We've had so many comments, use Yoo-hoo glue to do the slime stuff. Turns out the Yoo-hoo glue in Australia is completely different, but we've found the closest thing to it. So we've managed it. Let's do it.
So we could get on to the final highlights, the final stages of this project. There were a few little screens on the model that I wanted to paint, and I used some nice dull oranges, which is a little bit reminiscent of Fallout, and I think works well with the paint scheme. There were also a couple of needle gauges all over the terrain, and for these I painted them a bloody red. But these tiny pops of color are nothing next to all the lights that are along the walls and the large bar lights over the doors on the central bunker. For these I airbrushed in 3 greens to create an OSL effect. But before the final stage of green, I mixed some pale yellow with white and ran a highlight along the light. I then airbrushed this very bright neon green over the top of it all, and this really brought them all together. With these spot areas painted out, all we need to do is add the SFX. So let's see what Murray and I can come up with. So proving that Nurgle is the domain of all new life, we asked one of our studio guests to kindly pose cutely on our piece of terrain. For the final effects, we had these great ideas, and for me, it was panic stations. I found mixing the acrylic inks in with this glue caused it to coagulate way too quickly, and I was worried about stringing this color and getting paint all over our awesome work. So I ended up opting for just using the stringy glue without the coloration, but Murray had a little bit more success with his. To accent these in areas, I used Vallejo's vomit technical effect to put some more pussy horribleness all over this Nurgle flesh, and in areas around the servitor that is grown into the wall, I put some blood for the blood god from Citadel. With all these final touches in place, it's time to check out the reveals. while we enjoy looking at the beautiful bounty that Nurgle has provided us, I would like to thank all of our wonderful patrons for your support making these videos. We have an exclusive patron Discord where we can chat with you, check out what you're working on, and basically just hang out and do what you do on Discords. As well as that, we also have a monthly mini review, and we're now just starting weekly behind the scenes updates. So if you'd like to support what we do, please consider signing up to our Patreon. Links are in the description. On that note, we'd like to thank our newest members of the Patreon, Caitlin, Casey West, and Declan. Thank you so much for your support and welcome to the game.
And we're done.
This is so cool. I think of everything we've ever made on the entire channel, this is probably one of the things that I would most want to take home for my own gaming table.
I really like sculpting all the little bits and how it actually turned it from, well, boring terrain into something really cool.
Yeah, this sort of started as, oh, we could probably make Nurgle things, and we've made something really cool.
And I also want to say thank you to our sponsor, Jazza, and the Carry-All Studio bags, which are available right now on Kickstarter. Check out the links in the description.
We also want to say a big thank you to our little furry friend.